Hey, so this is the second one in this series of videos to cover our community ecology, community biology catch up sequence. This one is going to be the second half of the defense and succession. I think all classes actually got this, but let's go quickly down through the defense part. Don't forget, you need to remember all these types of defense and remember that they are often related to each other in some way. In particular, chemical defenses are often associated with, say, protective armor or protective spines or coloration. Okay, in particular, sorry. So remember those. I'm going to focus, though, on the succession part of this presentation. So let's go quickly past all these. And here we go. Okay, so succession. Community succession is community development. And I gave you some quick examples that showed how community development and succession have different meanings outside the field of biology. And that is, of course, creating a community that's safer for people, friendlier place to live, and also, of course, succession of the royal families of different countries around the world. So these are going to be different meanings, but they are related in the sense that a community development process for people leads to a different mix of people in the community, a different structure for the community, and that's true with biological communities as well. And of course, in the case of succession, the idea that one level of the family leads to the conditions that set up success for the second level, that's also built into the idea of biological succession. So let's take a quick look at this in the next few slides. So the idea of community succession is really another term for community development. It's the change in the community over time that happens by a series of species replacements. So literally that means species, or maybe better say populations, that were in a community at one time are disappearing and being replaced by new populations of other species, often that have different kinds of niches as well. So this is normally going to happen after a disturbance of some sort creates new space or clears up a space where a community can actually change. So this is why we talk about two types of succession here, primary and secondary. It's not like one always happens before the other, but one happens from a more clear space than the other, and that may be why we call it primary. The example of primary succession that is most obvious in the slides is this idea of a glacier in the background there that is receding because of climate change. It's melting, it's moving backwards. The glacier covered the area in the foreground once upon a time, which is all rocks at the moment, and then it moves back, leaving empty space. So certain kinds of plants can come in and grow on those rocks. So we'll cover that in a moment. And then they create soil, which then leads to other plants being able to take root there. On the right is secondary succession. The key idea here really is that soil is still there after a disaster, such as a forest fire. There's still soil there. There may even still be seeds there, which are going to be able to germinate after the fire. And that means secondary succession is typically much faster than primary succession. It's all about the soil being there or not. Primary succession, no soils left behind, or no soils available, period. Secondary succession, there is soil there. So primary succession diagrammatically looks like this. The bare rock is colonized by mosses and lichens. These are plant types of organisms. They actually produce their own food through photosynthesis, but they can grow on the bare rock with no soil. When the soil develops from the decayed remains of the mosses and lichens, then seeds can be brought in, maybe by birds dropping them or some other means, and then that soil will become thicker as the leaves and dead sticks and so forth drop off from those new plants the soil gets thicker, newer plants can grow, bigger plants can grow, and eventually we end up with maybe a forest there. Primary succession on a mountain could look like this series of pictures here. From the top left to the bottom left, we see that this area, this rock, is being covered up gradually by more and more plants. But what's really going on here is that climate change is leading to warmer and warmer conditions moving up the mountain, all right? The top left, 1921, the mountain is cold. It's too cold for trees to grow up there. As the climate warms up, trees are moving higher and higher on the mountain as new soil is created by those mosses and lichens. So by 2017, we have a fully fledged forest in the area. Primary succession can also happen after other kinds of events. This one is a volcanic island being created in the ocean where there was no land at all. That volcanic rock has to be degraded into soil by the wind, by the waves, and of course by mosses and lichens as well. So those eventually create soil which other kinds of plants can take root in. Birds may bring those other seeds along. They may float, or they even blow in. Here's an example of a seed that floats to a new habitat. Coconuts, therefore, are an example of a pioneer species that could take root on, say, a new volcanic island. Many times, though, coconuts will be rooting themselves in a beach, a sandy beach, where there is already soil. So they could also participate in secondary succession as well. Typically, primary succession is a long process, but in better conditions, as I said in the note in the top right, it can happen much faster, say in tens of years. And these better conditions are usually going to be tropical conditions, such as we have here in Southeast Asia. Warm throughout the year, relatively moist soil throughout the year, lots of light pretty much throughout the year. This means plants will grow faster and primary succession can be accelerated, all right, in some sense. Moving right along to keep within the 15-minute YouTube video limit, we have secondary succession. Now, secondary succession is, as I said earlier, dependent on the soil still being there. The soil must be intact for secondary succession to occur. And then the new community, whether it's from seeds brought from somewhere else or seeds that were already there, can grow much, much more quickly. Now, the example you see in the picture is a temperate forest. Temperate means areas of the world such as Japan, much of China, much of Europe, much of North America, the cooler parts of South America, all right, say south of Brazil, say into Argentina, for example. These areas tend to be temperate. They have different kinds of trees in them. They're not as warm and wet and fully energetic with light as tropical areas are. So again, secondary succession in those areas, temperate areas, will be slower than in a tropical zone, but comes back to the same old idea. Soil must be there for them to be able to grow. This is a special example I added for my classes, and this is a tropical forest that is well known here in Southeast Asia, the mangrove, Pachai Lane in Thai. And Pachai Lane is a area where we can see secondary succession really easily, right down the street from Celia almost, okay, just, half an hour drive at the Gulf of Thailand. So in this area, you will have muddy soil, all right, available, and that muddy soil may be cleared off by heavy waves, by storms, or even by fire or by people, okay, that cut down the mangrove trees. And then there's going to be a typical succession process of type of mangrove tree that grows back into those empty spots. So here we see some red mangroves growing back in where there was open space made available or cleared by a storm or other events that occurred. So as these mangroves grow back up, they trap more soil, and you can have a continuing process, actually a secondary succession going on, building new land in a sense from soil that accumulated from the old trees and even washed down from in the higher parts of the country. All right, so the last thing to add on this short clip is about pioneer species. You heard about one pioneer species a couple of minutes ago, the coconut. Other pioneer species could be the lichens, could be the mosses that grow directly on the rocks. The pioneer species is the one that comes in first and starts the succession process. It is able to grow in soils that are often poor or conditions that are often not ideal for other plants in the succession series to take root. Conditions that would be less than ideal would be much hotter than normal, or even temperature extremes, hot or cold, more than normal, which would be the case of, say, an open area that's getting full exposure to wind, to rain, to snow, and to sunlight. So more extreme temperatures, less soil obviously there to take root in the first place. Dryness could be a problem here, so the rain comes but then it dries out very fast because there's no shade. This kind of thing can create extreme conditions in an open area, which would not exist as much in a shady or protected area after succession takes place and we reach the climax community, which is the end of the process. So the climax community is mentioned on this slide back here, and that is the final community we find in the succession series. It's usually larger trees, it's trees with deeper roots. It's got a structured or layered kind of aspect to it with tall trees, medium-sized trees or bushes, and small plants on the ground. And it's going to have different animal communities as well that are segregated somewhat between the animals that live in the upper parts of the trees, those that live on the ground, for example, and even those that live underground in the soil can come along later in the succession series and be part of that climax community. We usually define succession communities in closing here by their plants because we can easily see the plants, we can study which plants are there, but there are animals that come along in the beginning stage, in the middle stages, in the later stage, which are usually pretty typical for a particular series of succession processes. Okay, that's it for now. That's all about succession. I hope that was helpful. See you in the next clip. Bye.